Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Eurogamer podcast with myself, Don Peppiatt, Deputy Editorial Director, and the wonderful Ashly Burch, actress, writer, director, singer. First up, Ashly, happy birthday for last week.
Oh, thank you. That's sweet.
It feels very apt that you can celebrate your birthday in Pride Month. I'm always quite jealous of that sort of thing as a December baby myself.
Well, it's funny because my birthday is also Juneteenth, so I feel like I really have to, Juneteenth is the more important holiday for sure. So
you can just defer it until Pride Week and then,
I defer.
celebrate.
Yeah, I defer. Yeah.
So just to lay out the groundwork, so to speak, this is a chat that's largely going to revolve around queerness in games, how that's changed over the course of your career, your own relationship to LGBTQ plus collective within our lovely section of internet culture. And we go live during Pride Week. So that's British Pride Week towards the end of June. Because I know internationally we have a lot of different times. It's very nice to have you here and to talk about this because I think queerness in gaming is something that it's not new, but it's definitely more visible now than it has been for a long time. And, we're quite a young industry generally. And so seeing more representation and things like that, and from actors like yourself that, identify as part of the umbrella, it's really, really nice to see that. And as a queer person myself, I love being on this website and having the platform to kind of espouse this sort of thing. You once said that half the characters I play are members of the Rainbow Fam, and that was even before you came out back in 2022. So it feels like queerness has always been an important part of your work, even before that.
Yeah, it's a funny, it's funny because sort of without specifically choosing these roles, I tend to play characters that have multiple versions of themselves and or are queer. It's how it turns out to be. And yeah, it was an interesting thing actually when I came out. The response I had from so many people was like, didn't you do this already? I think because so many of the characters that I play are queer that they were like, yeah, duh. Which is honestly kind of the best response to coming out that you can get is people being like, yeah, okay. And this is news. Why?
You kind of project an aura into the world, don't you?
I think so. I think people were like, duh.
Somebody once told me when I very first came out in 2016, I think it was, the first person I was talking to about this around that time said to me, you never just come out once. You kind of come out all your life. You come out once and then that might be it for you and, your immediate family. But every time you meet a new person or in this sort of industry, a new job or a new role, or you find a new audience, you're kind of doing it again. And it's a non-stop thing. And you become more confident, I suppose. You get more practice in how you do that. And it kind of becomes more part of your identity, I think. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That is really true. I actually I'm in a writer's room right now, and I think the way I said it in the room at some point in the conversation we were having was that I was a little bit gay, which is like not necessarily even, I identify as queer. But it is a funny thing. I think this happens a lot also for folks that I should say in conversations that I've had with friends that identify as bi or as pan or as queer, there is also a little bit of imposter syndrome. Especially, I'm married and I'm married to a man, so it's one of those things where, it's a funny thing to navigate sometimes because it's part of my identity. But also, I was talking to someone recently about, I'm white passing and I'm half Asian and I'm like straight passing. Like I'm just everything. I'm half everything, basically. I'm half gay. I'm half straight. I'm half white. And that's part of the reason actually that I came out when I did, was that I could have just basically flown under the. Well, apparently I couldn't have flown under the radar because everyone else thought that I had already come out. But I could have flown under the radar for basically ever. And it just felt important to not do that, especially with what was happening in the States at the time. So yeah, it is a funny thing, especially because there's always a bit of a calibration that people do when they like hear husband and then they hear me, say that Cameron Diaz was my bisexual awakening in The Mask,
Good taste. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. I'm polyamorous and have multiple partners and of different genders. And I was for a long time nesting with a woman, and that imposter syndrome you mentioned, I completely understand that.
Yeah.
It's so funny as queer people, we're supposed to be allied and together. And, I very much believe that T stands with the rest of the LGBT community, obviously. And so like having imposter syndrome for being bisexual feels like such a mix up and a kind of incongruous thing to some people, I think.
Because no one actually, no one in the queer community has ever been like, you're not real. No one's ever been, no one's ever come at me. And it extends into my racial identity as well, honestly. It's like there's this sort of, I think for me at least, the perception is like, I know that there's a privilege in being able to pass. So I think there is a bit of a guilt or like even just an acknowledgement that like I walk down the street and I'm holding hands with a man. So visibly, I have that straight passing privilege versus it is different for a gay man or a gay woman, So there is some amount of, acknowledging privilege. As I've aged and I've gotten more comfortable with my identity, I've used it less as like a stick to beat myself with. But I think it is, it's important for me to also acknowledge that I have like passing privilege in many aspects of my life.
And I think that's why intersectionality is so important to queerness as well, to understand that queerness is so deeply linked to like racial history and things like that. Stonewall wouldn't have existed without the Black community and Black trans women stepping up and kind of, fighting for our rights and stuff. And I think that is something that I like to call them the baby gays, the younger people that are coming up and kind of stuff. It's such an important part of the history that it's kind of, I feel, as I get a little bit older and we have these platforms to educate people on. And I think by playing queer characters and showing that in media is a fantastic way of getting that message across and kind of sharing the history of, our collective group.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was going to use that to sort of like springboard onto some of the characters you played because Parvati from Outer Worlds is, I think, a really good example of this intersectionality. And she's ace, and you don't see a lot of ace characters in media, let alone games. I can possibly think about Todd and Yolanda from BoJack Horseman, and that's about it otherwise.
Right.
Did you do anything different to prepare for that role? Was her asexuality just part of her makeup, or was it something that affected how she is, how she speaks, and how she acts for you?
No, so it's interesting, like, for those that may not know how lots of game development happens for the performers, often you don't get scripts ahead of time, and you're sort of discovering what's happening with the character in the booth as you're performing it. So I actually had an interesting experience with Parvati where it was one of her earlier scenes, and the dialogue that she was saying, she's sort of coyly telling the player character a little bit about one of her past, romantic experiences. And I remember recording it and being like, is she ace? And I wasn't, I was like, there's no way. I've never, because I had the same experience of being like, no one ever talks about asexuality in games. There's no way. And then we got into a deeper conversation. I was like, oh my God, she is ace. And I remember just being so delighted by that. Because as you say, like it so rarely comes up in media. And I'd never seen it in games before. Either. And I thought it was just such a well-calibrated and well-explored way of doing that storyline, because she has a romantic connection to another woman and is afraid of getting into a relationship with her because she doesn't want to have sex. And that has not been, she has conversations where she talks about previous partners that she had that were not okay with that, And so yeah, I kind of discovered it as the story progressed. So I had a similar sort of experience of being like, there's no way a sci-fi game is going to have an asexual character, but lo and behold, and I just thought it was so cool. Kate Dollarhide, who's the writer on that game, and she wrote the Parvati storylines. I think, I mean, I don't know if that's her identity or if she just did an amazing job of like researching it and being true to that experience. But I just thought it was so beautifully done. And I felt very honored, honestly, to get to play that character because it did feel so unique and completely new territory for games in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also an important aspect of our representation because people often think that if you're on the LGBTQ spectrum, we're all like unrepentant horn dogs with deviant sex drives and that kind of thing.
Right.
The actual umbrella covers the whole spectrum of sexuality and like sex drive and all that sort of stuff. And again, I don't think a lot of people recognize that as part of the community, especially because some of the heavier representation or more representation tends to be towards the kind of like sexually active or like out stuff. So it's just a really nice example of being like, and this.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think, kind of implicitly educating people about the difference between like that you can be biromantic or homoromantic and still be asexual. Like there's any sort of combo of things, that are available in the human experience. And I think she was like a cool I'm sure she was a cool entryway for some players into like what, I mean, I'm certain that there are some people that like, this is the first time they're hearing about that, you know? And Parvati is such a lovable character that it's such a cool, sweet way to like, I think, intro people to that sort of concept that might not be familiar.
Absolutely. When I was researching this and kind of putting the questions together, I saw a couple of Reddit threads where people were like, I didn't realize there was a word for this. This is how I feel. And so I think that
Oh,
character helped people get in touch with where they are landing on the spectrum, which again, it's the
that's
point of
so
what we do, I think.
nice. Uh, oh, that touches me. That's so nice.
So I'm not trying to break you on the podcast, but
Oh, yeah. It'll probably happen.
and then another character again, in terms of like trying to show the wealth of the spectrum, would be, I mean, one of the most important sapphic characters in gaming is Chloe Price.
Right.
Like, I think a lot of people I know anecdotally from my life kind of played that game and they were like, oh, I feel like this. So
Oh, wow.
I think it's such a, especially because it's set in that kind of high school, teenage, coming of age
Yes,
scenario.
totally.
I think a lot of people could either reflect on that, or people that had to delay their coming out, or for whatever reason, playing that as an adult or a young adult and then kind of mapping their experiences onto this. I think I know it touched and connected with a lot of people. Bringing this up, I would be remiss if I didn't ask or mention, I've got thoughts on Chloe and her relationships, because everyone always likes to ask, is it Max or Rachel? Like, who's the right person?
Uh,
Who's the right fit? But as a polyamorous
right.
person, I think Chloe could handle multiple relationships, is
Oh,
my
sure,
kind of,
sure.
maybe I'm
Yeah.
just projecting that onto the character in a selfish way. But I mean, that's a good question for you. So do you find yourself projecting onto these characters? Do you think that affects how you play them and characterize them? Or like, even when, after, as you said, the development process, you kind of go along for the journey as we do. But as you're playing them, do you kind of find yourself adding richness and depth the more you're kind of going on that journey with them?
Yeah, I mean, I've also, I've talked about my perspective on Chloe and have definitely been. I really tried to impart that even though I play her, I am not like whatever perception you have of whoever she would be with is a valid, Um, so from my perspective, to me, the way that I played it was that Rachel was like the big, like true first love. Like that is a person that has a piece of Chloe's heart that's just never gonna go away. Like she just wormed her way into Chloe's brain and heart and she just lives there. So, regardless of whatever connection she has with Max, I do think there is like something, it's a tent pole, I think, for her. And so that is sort of how, that was sort of my guiding perception of Chloe and the way I characterized her involvement in the plot. Like so much of it was like, I need to find Rachel and I need to find out what happened to Rachel because of how much that character meant to her. And then aside from that, look, I did play through I Kiss Max. It's all, whatever you want. For me, it's like definitely, to me, there's something special about the relationship with Rachel. There's like something very seminal and very specific and very, very special about that relationship. My headcanon is possibly that like Max is someone that Chloe is attracted to, but not necessarily like would romantically be involved with. Like it's a best friendship. Rachel was so important that it's almost like that had to be the sort of tentpole relationship in my mind in a way. But again, look, Chloe could totally be polyamorous. I could see it. She'd probably love it. Oh my God, are you kidding? The thing I'll say too about Chloe that I love is how she, I think, has a lot of insecurity and trauma in other ways, but her sexuality is not one of those ways. Like she got no qualms about liking whoever she likes, which I think is a beautiful thing. Because I think she is queer because she's expresses attraction to men in the game as well. But there's no need to define it, and she has no like shame or like hangups about it, which I love that they did. It's just like, no, this is who this person is. So yeah, don't come at me. My perception is not canon. It's just sort of it's how I conceptualized it when I was playing her.
Of course, of course. And what you're saying there as well, I really, really like the fact that the way that Life is Strange deals with that is, as you say, her sexuality just is. It's not necessarily a plot point. It's not, they use the term bury your gaze in a lot of media to kind of like that queer trauma is the storyline. That if you're queer, that is the story that pushes you. And I think Life is Strange, quite sort of relatively early on in the kind of modern queerness of games, really sort of stepped away from that and was like, yep, that's not the story. That just is. And
Right.
I think that was a
Yeah.
really brave choice. I agree. And sort of going from one vaguely like self-knowing chaotic character to another, you can't really talk about queerness in your roles without talking about Tiny Tina. Uh, I've seen people describe Wonderlands especially as like an authentically queer game, which I
Oh,
think again is
yeah, yeah,
really, really nice and a kind of a really good lightning rod that I think gamers
yeah.
should sort of be aware of.
And the dragon's like, "Wah!" And you're all like,
Because I think some people might see Borderlands and that kind of edgy humor and not necessarily know there's that more gentle queer heart kind of beating in the middle of it.
I think that Borderlands has more queer characters, like a lot of other like secretly than a lot of other games. Especially Borderlands 2. Like my brother wrote it and he's queer. And so he just, I mean, there's characters you're having a conversation with and all of a sudden they talk about their girlfriend and their woman. You're like, what? So it's baked into the fabric of the game. And Tina in particular, you were talking about the perception of queer people or LGBTQ plus people as like horny on main. Tina is that. She is as gay as the day is long, and she is extremely horny from the jump. So she is the sort of quintessential, whatever, horny gay. When Anthony wrote that character, he sort of realized that he was writing her for me, more or less. She's heavily influenced by the character the non-realistic version of myself that I play in our web series, Hey Ash, What You Playing? And that Ash is gay and constantly objectifying women. And so we just transfer that over to a 13-year-old girl. So yeah, it's one of the funny aspects of Tina. I can't remember what DLC it is, but there's some sort of communication that's happening between Tina and Moxie, and Tina's just like losing her mind and cannot stop talking about like I think she's even like trying to be respectful, but like can't quite because she's too horny for Moxie, which is funny because yeah, Moxie's played by my friend Brina Palencia, so it was funny to
That
imagine
real life
having this
interaction in the
conversation
booth.
with Brina. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
she's really, I mean, she's also a fun, because I think often, like, even when we think about LGBT characters, if we're thinking of, like, sort of a more, sex-forward person, I think stereotypically people think of gay men more than gay women. So there is something that's sort of fun about Tina being, like, desperately horny.
I think it comes through in a character as well. Like you can hear you having fun playing her. Like I can hear you smile.
Yeah.
It feels like in some of the lines as it's being delivered.
Yeah.
And I think you can really see your connection to that and the kind of like, I'm just gonna get this out there, like embracing
Yeah,
that chaos.
yeah. Oh, she's so fun. I have so much fun playing. Like, she's so wacky. I mean, you can't not have fun playing that character. She's amazing.
The next one I've got down, is Aloy, because between I think Chloe, Tina, and Parvati kind of form this sort of triangulation of queer roles representing strength, chaos,
True.
and assuredness, I think, right? And then in the middle somewhere,
Yeah.
you've got Aloy, I think, who
Yeah,
is a little bit of all of them in her own way. Yeah, I just really enjoy how it kind of becomes this, because she's very textured and there's a lot of depth to Aloy. And we didn't obviously
Right.
know for sure that she was queer until Burning Shores in the most recent DLC.
right. We suspected, certainly,
Yeah,
but we
it
didn't know.
was-
Yeah.
For those with the eyes to see,
Yeah, right, exactly.
But I think then coming onto this, it kind of comes onto a bit of the dark side of queer representation, which is when
Mm.
the Aloy, the Forbidden Shores stuff dropped, Burning Shores stuff dropped, there was a big pushback from a large part of the gaming community. It was review bombs, and that actually ended up with Steam going and sorting out how they are curating their reviews a little bit more because of that review bombing.
Mm.
Like, I'm sorry to bring this up. I want this to be a celebration of
No,
pride
no.
and stuff, but I think it
No,
comes
no,
with
no,
both
look.
sides, right?
Yes, totally, of course, yeah.
What was your reaction to that? And like, I know, like being out and visible, it kind of comes with, unfortunately, this double-edged sword, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I saw comments on one of the videos of because people will clip out like there's the moment where you can choose whether or not you kiss Seika at the end of the DLC. And there was a comment on one of the videos that was like, did people play the same game as me? Like, this is not a surprise. And that's sort of how I felt too. Like, I think people like to, they like to do the sort of get woke, go broke, as if like this is some sort of woke gesture. But But to me, and as you said, like to anyone with eyes to see, it's like such an obvious, like natural progression for this character. When they were like, you're going to have this romance with this female character, I was like, yes, obviously. And what else? Like, it just sort of seemed like, and this is also not just like Gorilla has not confirmed whether or not Aloy is gay, whether she's queer. Like there's, we know she likes this person. So that's also not to say I don't know what their plans are. Like, but to me, Aloy was never straight. My God, she was never straight. Like, so it's a funny thing to me as someone that has this conception of this character, and that has always sort of been my headcanon, to have people be like, they're, because from the jump, from Zero Dawn, I was like, this girl ain't straight. Like, I just, and yeah, I mean, I think for some people, they think that there's like a tonnage of Sony main characters that are lesbian or whatever, i.e. Ellie in Last of Us. Queerness is, I think, often seen as this sort of niche thing that, like, 1 out of every 100 or 1,000 people are queer in some way, and that like straightness is a default. And I just don't think that's true.
I agree.
And to me, Ellie being gay just makes so much sense for that character. And Aloy being queer makes so much sense for that character. And I can't pinpoint exactly what it is, but I just feel that if we had come out and said, if we had said that like Aloy is straight, she only dates men, I'd be like, I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, I agree.
I would think as her performer, I'd be like, that strikes me as a little weird. Like, I just know, like, that just doesn't seem like Aloy to me. So it's such a funny thing where, like, I wasn't necessarily I would guess I was maybe even a little surprised by the pushback, because I was like, do we know the same character? It's just a reminder, obviously, that like that as a plot point is always going to be scrutinized as a company trying to get points from someone. I don't know who. I don't know who they think they're getting points from. But to me, it was sort of nice in a way and validating that like Gorilla sees the character the same way that I always have. So in a way, at the end of the day, even though it's annoying and disappointing that happened, it was also valid. Like the storyline is validation that, we're all on the same page of who this person is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you from Zero Dawn. I was like, I mapped biness onto Aloy from the start. I was just like, this is so bi-coded. I can't explain quite why.
Oh my God.
But it's just there, isn't it?
No, but it's totally like, if you are queer and you play that game, you're like, that bitch ain't straight. Like, it's like an immediate, you know what I mean? Like, there's just something about her. And, I don't know, maybe it's because I was playing. I don't know. To me, it's just, and it's funny too, because I saw some people being like, just because her actor is queer. And I'm like, I don't think that's why they did it. But I don't know. The point is that she's queer. I don't know what to tell you guys.
Yeah. Just gotta live with that now. It's the canon. That is official,
yeah,
right?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So talking about this stuff, it kind of puts me in mind of, I've got mixed feelings about the way that player run games. Like a good example is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I think was the first one, that let you as a player romance people of both genders or any gender. And they call that player sexual, that the NPCs fancy you because you're the player and you're all big and important and strong. And so that's how they go. I think it was a wonderful representation and kind of implementation of queerness. If Cassandra is gay to you, you can play her as gay. If she's bi, you can play her as bi. If she's straight, you can play her as straight. I think it was just a really nice way of doing it. But at the same time, those interactions were not scripted specifically to be queer. They were just a kind of catch-all. So I think it's a bit of a balancing act there, of which it's a nice representation, but it's also kind of just ticking all the boxes for the sake. So I really like seeing properly written scripted characters like Aloy that then do go through that arc themselves.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, for me as a writer even, it has been an interesting evolution for me in my perception of exactly what you're saying, that like, because I think earlier on in my writing career, I was like, just write people without taking sexuality or race or anything into account. Like it's all, Alien rules, where like basically they just wrote the characters and then they cast whoever, which is awesome. Actually, like obviously that worked out extremely well in Alien. Alien's an incredible film. But as I sort of as I learned more and I developed more and researched more and met more people and had more conversations, it has become clear to me that identity erasure also isn't necessarily the way to go, which is, again, not to say that, like, if you're, because I've also spoken to aspiring writers that are like, you know, I'm scared to write a woman. What if I do it wrong? Like, don't worry, but just write. Like, just write a character, write a person, and it will be fine. But at least for me personally, like, you know, we wrote for Side Quest, which was the spinoff of Mythic Quest that I co-show ran with a couple of writers from Mythic Quest. We had an episode that was set in a Black-owned comic book store, and it's basically an all-Black cast. And it's a bottle episode where there's one Mythic Quest comic that features like the first, you know, Black main character who has his own comic. There's only one copy. They're all fighting over who gets it. And going into that episode, it was important for us to, it was a calibration, because you also don't want like every Black movie is a slavery movie. You don't want that. But you also don't want a thing where like these characters aren't Black. Like, you know what I mean? You don't want it to be like a thing where like this is just a bunch of white people that they've cast as, you know, with Black actors. Like, we wanted it to feel like this is a authentic to the Black community story. So we had, you know, it was co-written by 2 Black writers, and we, you know, one of them, Javi Scott, who is one of our writers, is the biggest nerd I've ever met. And it was really like a love letter to Black nerds. And it was important to us that it feel like it was a love letter to Black nerds. Like, that is a specific community. They have specific, like, there's specific things that there's a whole exchange and conversation about like which characters they claim as Black. Like Piccolo is a character they claim as Black, which is a thing in the Black community. So it's this thing of like, and it's the same thing with queer culture, which is to say that like, you want representation and you don't want it to be, again, it's not like every Black movie is 12 Years a Slave, or every queer movie is like fucking Milk. You know what I mean? Like, it needs to be, there needs to be like variety without the erasure of the fact that like there is culture here. So to your point, it is an interesting balance. And I don't know that it's like necessarily needs to exclusively be one way or the other, but I do think there needs to be a balance of like, because as I mentioned, I do think there can be interesting things that come through like gender blind casting or race blind casting, depending on what your story is. But I think also there need to be stories that really acknowledge like, no, this person's queer, and that means something. That means that impacts the way they interact with the world and they interact with other people and influences who they are as characters. It's not just like a factoid about them, which isn't to say that it then will lead to like horrible trauma or that they're traumatized, but that it is a perspective.
Yes.
You know, it's a lens, and that needs to be honored.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I don't have an answer really to that either, but it is an interesting thing to think about, that like that is meaningful.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like you say, it's a balance. For every sort of Bridgerton with its kind of like race blind casting, there can be a Sinners, which is explicitly going in for that story and telling a very specific story, right? That's I think a really good way of putting it. And certain people have certain stories to tell, because from what you were saying there, it sounds like your relationship with your queerness over the last few years has really sort of helped you be more intersectional when it comes to the approach of writing as well. That's the kind of the thing I'm picking up there. And again, I think a lot of people in the queer, looking maybe at queerness from an outside perspective, don't understand quite how important that intersection is and how much we really need to like celebrate that. And it sounds like it's exactly what you're doing in being a writer.
As you say, we must teach the baby gays about who threw the first brick at Stonewall. You know what I mean? Like, as in so many parts of our culture, we owe everything to Black women. It's really what it is. So yeah, it's that intersectionality in all these regards is so important.
I think this kind of then cottons on quite nicely to like the mental health stuff that you're doing at the moment with your new show.
Mental health issues affect 1 in 4 people on the planet. 1 in 4. That is a staggering number. That means that almost 800 million people on the planet suffer from some kind of mental health issue.
It's 1.9 billion.
Sorry, what?
It's 1.9 billion. Not 8. You said 800 million. Your math is a little off.
Yeah, of course it is. I knew this was gonna happen. I knew I was gonna fuck up the show.
You can't talk about queerness without talking about mental health. The two are intrinsically linked. Like there's some miserable stats I could throw up about mental health and queerness and, you know, mortality rates and things like that. But I just wanted to ask you, when it comes to the show specifically as well, is that something that's intersecting with it? I know you've had a few episodes out now, and by the time this airs, there'll be more out, I believe. So is the queerness something that was coming into that when you're writing it and when you're conceiving of it and just telling the story?
Yeah, so we have to sort of give a little primer on what the show is. It's called I'm Happy You're Here, and it's a comedy mental health show. And we released the first episode on YouTube, and it's about anxiety disorder. It's inspired by shows that I watched coming up, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Sesame Street and stuff, but it is for adults. So I do talk about fucking a puppet within the first 3 minutes. So the humor is edgy because I think that's important. Like for me, you know, I've had anxiety and OCD forever, and I don't know if you relate to this, but it's just one of those things where like I struggle enough with that, so I don't want to talk about mental health in a way that's like very grim and dour. It has to be funny. Like it has to be light. Otherwise I don't want to do it. Like you know what I mean? Like I have to inject some sort of humor into it. So that's also the energy behind the show. And we're still trying to figure out, that was a sort of self-finance, like let's put it out, I believe in this show kind of thing. And we're still trying to figure out exactly how to make it a sustainable thing to make more episodes. But the response has been amazing for like only having one episode out. I think we have like 50,000 subscribers, and like that episode has like over 300,000 views. So apparently the algorithm's like, ooh, people have anxiety. They need to see this. But I have like topics that I want to cover. Like I want to talk about like coming out as an adult. Like I want to make an episode about that. I want to make an episode about transitioning as an adult, or like body dysmorphia. And it'd be amazing to do one about like, you know, okay, you've decided that you're transitioning. Now, what does that look like? Like, what does that mean? Like, where, you know, what's the process? Like, what should you look out for? What questions should you be asking? You know, because really the show is meant to be a guide for adults about shit that no one is helping us with. So, you know, there's also like, I would love to do an episode about divorce, for example, because that is an acutely adult, or a specifically adult experience that is very difficult and very emotional, bordering on traumatizing for some people, depending on how it goes. And there's a lot of shame and a lot of isolation that happens around it. And that shouldn't be necessary. And it's the same thing with any, you know, figuring out if you need to transition is hard enough without, the other bullshit that society puts on top of it. So it's one of those things where like there's kind of unfortunately an unending number of topics that we could cover, but that is absolutely like, I would so love to do episodes that are directly related to the queer experience, and to, you know, get the drag queens that I love maybe to be on the show.
I mean, it sounds like a perfect marriage, really, for two appointments. And it feels like the theme of this conversation so far is just, it has been like, everything is linked. Everything is linked together. Like you can't unpick queerness from any other part of the fabric of life. And if for people that are queer, that is an immutable truth. And I think a lot of people maybe that see their Blue Sky feed or see the TV and they're like, oh, it's the gay agenda. It's just the gays are everywhere. They're everywhere. Like, I promise they're not. And there is still very little representation compared. And if you think it's exhausting watching it, imagine living it, buddy.
You speak to any Black person when they hear like someone being like, why does everything have to be our race? It's like, try being a Black person. Like, everything is about race, whether you want it to be or not. Like, that is just the experience. Like, you are received in the world as a Black person. You are received in the world as a queer person. Like, that is part of your experience. And asking someone to like not make it about sexuality or not make it about race is an invalidation of that person, of who that person is. It is baked into the fiber of who they are.
I think that's why I find the kind of like comments that we get on a lot of articles, that you see in a lot of things about games, TV, music even, that are like, oh, keep politics out of my art. It's like, living is an inherently political act. And
yes,
art
absolutely
needs to reflect that. And I think a lot of people that say, I don't want to be political, maybe have not seen the scope of what that actually entails and how existence itself is a political act. Existing in the world as it stands right now across both the UK and America, just to be alive is to be political, frankly.
Absolutely. I wish I could remember the comedian. It's a clip that went viral But he's talking about like, yeah, you don't care about politics. That makes sense. So you don't care about clean air or being able to mail things or having clean water or and he just lists for like 5 minutes all the things that politics touches. So it is this thing of like, even if you're a straight cis white man, you're living a political life because politics touches everything. And it is a carefully calculated lie that it only impacts marginalized people. It is a way of separating us. It's a way of making it seem like there are factions and that we're not all, being impacted by the same choices by the same, wacky people that are currently in power.
I completely agree for absolutely everything. I think that's why it's so important we have weeks like this, that weeks like Pride Week, where, and like, you say Juneteenth as well in America, which we've passed by this point, where you can celebrate these things and remember these things and find space to talk about these things. Because whilst people think that it's everywhere now, it's still very much confined to 1 week versus the rest of the year, where everyone gets to just have their normal, media and their normal life. I'm aware that we are coming to the time. So there's a couple of kind of quick fire questions I can throw at you, if that's okay.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So can you recall your first interaction with queerness in gaming, whether that was a character that felt kind of gay to you that wasn't explicit? We talked about claiming characters as our own. Was it something like that you experienced, or was it some sort of like revelation you had?
I think Peach is gay. I just think she is. Right? I think Peach is gay. Sorry, Mario.
That's why she keeps running off.
Yeah, I feel like Peach and Daisy are, sorry. It's this, they're an item. It's just.
Have you seen Daisy's Mario Kart outfit? That smacks of gay, doesn't it? Like
before. Oh yeah, I think Daisy's out. Daisy is out and is like, Peach, you can do it. I swear. I'll be right there with you. And Peach is like, I don't know. I'm running a kingdom. How's it going to affect me politically? You know what I mean? I think that's what it is.
That gives me big Princess Bubblegum from Adventure Time vibes. It kind of took Marceline to get her out.
Oh, yes. Totally. It's totally Marcy and PB. 100%. Yeah,
absolutely. And another quick one. Do you have a favorite queer character in games? Or is that like trying to pick a favorite song and it kind of changes depending on the mood? Is there someone that you look at in games and you're like, this person, they get me, man?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm gonna actually express a grievance.
Oh.
Which is that I also think that Tali in Mass Effect is queer, and I'm annoyed that you can't romance her. I think that's bullshit. I think there's no way she's straight. That's another one where I'm like, no. So I'm claiming her. I do really love Liara. I think Liara is an awesome character, and my shepherd's arc with her was really interesting because I dated her in the first game, and then I dated Thane in the second one.
Great taste.
And then there's the DLC where that's what is it? The Shadow Broker DLC. And there's a conversation you guys can have where she's like, "Do you want to get back together?" And at the time, I was like, "No." But then going into 3, there's the suicide mission that you can mind meld with her. And I don't know if she does this anyway, if you hadn't romanced her in previous games, but she put her head on my shoulder. And I was like, oh my God, she's still in love with me. Oh no. And I find her such an interesting character because she is starts as sort of this soft-spoken techie type. But then when she becomes the Shadow Broker, that scene with her in Mass Effect 2, I was like, oh, what happened to Liara? Like, she just has this really interesting arc that you don't expect from her. And that on top of my romantic arc with her, I just thought that had such depth to it. So I really like Liara. I think she's a cool character.
Another fantastic choice. I'm glad you brought up Mass Effect 2 because I genuinely think, not to get all arch and stuff, but I think that game really helped me understand my queerness. Playing through as, I believe I was playing as a femshep and then romancing Thane. And that interaction with Thane, I was like, I want to live with me, Thane. Jesus Christ. He's such a good character.
You're one of the few people I've talked to that romance Thane. Everyone romances Garrus. And I was like, oh, but Thane though.
Look, I'm an emo at heart, and the big sad dad vibes that he was giving off, I was just like, oh, the sad dads are going to get me. Oh, this is it now.
I know. I was like, oh, he saved all the Solarians. He put them all in a closet. I love him.
Fantastic. I mean, what a note to end on. I had a feeling we'd end up talking about Mass Effect here as well. So
I know. Anytime I talk about games, it comes up somehow.
it's seminal, right? You can't avoid it, especially.
It's so good. It's just the best game. I love it so much.
While we're on this tangent, I suppose, I was talking to a friend recently that, people really, really go after Star Wars. The people that grew up with Star Wars and the generation above myself, I suppose, they really see it as this life-changing thing that they really attach themselves to. I really think for this generation, Mass Effect was that, because not only was it a story told across 3 installments that kind of followed me through my adolescence, it was my story. That was my story that I was going back to every couple of years and then completing it as I went to university. And I just think that has done something to my brain forever. That has made it so important. And I've read you talk about Mass Effect before.
To me, it's some of the best writing in games. I mean, it's such deep, especially the characters. It's like Morden's arc over Mass Effect 2 and 3 is still one of the most impactful storylines that I've experienced in games. I just love, the different themes of redemption and the sort of gray areas around the genophage, it's just dense politically and in terms of character depth, while also being really fucking goofy sometimes and funny. And I just love it to pieces. I love it so much.
It's that contrast, isn't it? The goofiness and the seriousness just make each other sing even more. I think it just hit that balance so perfectly. So
yeah, it's so good. I love those games so much.
I might have to reinstall it now. Okay, that's a good way to end, I suppose. Ashly, thank you so much for your time. It's been a really nice chat.
Yeah, thank you.
It's lovely to talk about queerness in this kind of more jovial and jubilant way, and especially during a week like this. I think it's so important to shed light on the joy and the happiness within it. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fun.